Billionaire boss witnesses employees' kindness. His proposal will leave you speechless. Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome to Love Crib, your ultimate destination for all things romance, connection, and heartfelt stories. I'm thrilled to have you here, sharing this amazing journey of exploring love in all its beautiful, complex, and magical forms. Whether you're a hopeless romantic, someone searching for relationship insights, or just love diving into heartwarming content, you're exactly where you need to be. If you're enjoying what you see, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could hit that subscribe button to stay connected with our Love Crib community. Drop a like to show some love, support, and motivation. Share this video with someone who might need a little romance in their life. Your support means a world to me and helps us continue creating content that celebrates love, connection, and the beautiful stories that bring us together. The rain pattered against the windows of Oak Ridge Community Haven, creating a soothing rhythm that contrasted with the chaos of the day. Elena Wright moved efficiently between tables in the dining area, her dark curls pulled back in a practical bun, warm brown eyes checking on each resident with genuine concern. The scent of homemade vegetable soup and fresh bread filled the air, creating an atmosphere of comfort despite the storm raging outside. "Ms. Doris, did you get enough to eat? I saved an extra roll just for you," Elena said, placing the warm bread on the elderly woman's plate. She'd noticed Ms. Doris barely touching her food earlier, a sure sign that her arthritis was flaring up again. "You're an angel, Elena," Ms. Doris replied, patting Elena's hand with gnarled fingers that spoke of decades of hard work. "Always thinking of everyone else. When are you going to let someone think about you for a change?" Elena's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly, a skill she perfected over the years. "I have everything I need right here." And Ms. Doris hummed knowingly, her wise eyes seeing more than Elena wished to reveal. "That's what your grandmother used to say, too, right up until Mr. Rose swept her off her feet and proved her wrong." Elena laughed softly, straightening the napkins on the table. "Grandma Rose and I are different that way. She was a romantic at heart, and you're not." Ms. Doris challenged with a raised eyebrow. "I'm a realist," Elena replied, her tone gentle but final. Later, as the residents settled in for the night, Elena stood by the window in her small office, watching raindrops trace patterns down the glass. The old building creaked and groaned against the wind, familiar sounds that had become a comfort over the years. Her reflection stared back at her. 32 years old, dedicated to the shelter her grandmother had started, and still nursing wounds from a relationship that had ended 3 years ago when her fiancé chose career advancement across the country over their future together. "Some promises aren't meant to be kept," she thought, absently twisting the simple silver ring she now wore on her right hand instead of her left. "But the promise I made to Grandma Rose, to keep this place a sanctuary, that's one I'll never break." The shelter had been her salvation after Tyler left, giving her purpose when her personal plans collapsed. Here, amid the broken lives finding new paths, Elena had rebuilt her own life one day at a time. If sometimes she felt hollow inside, if occasionally she caught herself wondering what might have been, she pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the needs around her. She turned away from the window and gathered her rain jacket and umbrella. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The winter fundraiser was approaching, and they were still far short of their goal. But tonight, she would go home to her small apartment, light a candle, and read another chapter of the mystery novel that offered temporary escape from reality. As she locked the shelter's front door, she missed a sleek black car that drove slowly past, its occupant gazing thoughtfully at the modest building that would soon change both their lives. Elena Wright had grown up listening to her grandmother's stories about second chances. Rose Wright had established Oak Ridge Community Haven after her own experience with homelessness following a difficult divorce in the 1970s. Left with nothing but determination at 45, Rose had clawed her way back to stability and vowed to create a place where others could do the same. The shelter had become more than a building. It was a legacy of hope that Elena had embraced with her whole heart after graduating with a social work degree. She'd turned down more lucrative positions to work alongside her grandmother, learning the intricacies of grant writing, donor relations, and most importantly, the delicate art of helping people rebuild their dignity along with their lives. When Rose passed away 5 years ago, Elena had stepped into the role of director with a mix of grief and resolve. The shelter's board had questioned whether her youth would be a liability, but Elena had proved herself through dedication and innovation, expanding their programs while maintaining the personal touch that made Oak Ridge Haven unique. "You have your grandmother's spirit," Marilyn, the shelter's longtime cook, often told her as they prepared meals together in the industrial kitchen. She never saw people as problems to be solved, just hearts that needed healing. Marilyn, a recovering addict who had been one of Rose's first success stories, now mentored younger residents struggling with similar demons. Her transformation was one of many that kept Elena going on difficult days. "I had a good teacher," Elena would respond, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. "Two good teachers, actually." But Elena's own heart remained cautious. The dissolution of her engagement to Tyler had left her wary of promises and skeptical of happy endings. They had met in college, she studying social work, he pursuing a business degree, and had balanced each other in ways that seemed perfect. Tyler had proposed the night of her grandmother's funeral, offering stability when she felt most adrift. For 2 years, they had planned a life together, a future that blended his ambition with her compassion. Then came the job offer in Seattle, a significant promotion that Tyler couldn't refuse. He had asked her to come with him, to find work there, to leave the shelter in other hands. The request had revealed how little he understood her, how differently they defined commitment. The engagement had ended in tears and recriminations, with Tyler accusing her of choosing strangers over their relationship, and Elena unable to make him understand that Oak Ridge Haven wasn't just a job, but calling. She poured herself into the shelter instead, finding purpose in helping others rebuild their lives. If sometimes she lay awake wondering if she'd made the right choice, if occasionally she saw Tyler's posts on social media showing his new life with a stylish corporate wife, she kept those moments of doubt to herself. Across town, Alexander Cole sat in his corner office at Cole Enterprises, reviewing quarterly reports with a detached efficiency that had become his trademark. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, the visible manifestation of the Cole family's influence on urban development over 3 generations. At 35, he had fulfilled his father's expectations by expanding the family business into new markets, streamlining operations, and increasing profits by 20% in just 4 years as CEO. His professional reputation was impeccable, decisive, strategic, and ruthlessly effective. Business magazines featured him regularly, praising his innovative approach while speculating about his private life, which he guarded jealously. Alexander loosened his ties slightly, the only concession to the late hour. The office around him had grown quiet as employees departed, but he remained, finding solitude preferable to the emptiness of his penthouse apartment. "Mr. Cole, the board is waiting in the conference room," his assistant announced, entering after a perfunctory knock. Jessica had been with him for 6 years, one of the few people who glimpsed the man behind the executive facade. Alexander nodded, straightening his impeccable tie. "And my father?" "Called in. He's on the line from Tokyo." Alexander's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Even from across the world, Richard Cole's presence loomed large, casting a shadow over every decision. At 68, Richard had officially retired but maintained an iron grip on the company's direction through his position as chairman of the board. "Thank you, Jessica. You should head home. It's late." "Not until you do, sir," she replied with the familiarity of long association. "I ordered dinner for you. It's in the conference room." Alexander offered a rare smile. "What would I do without you?" "Starve, probably," she answered dryly. "The quarterly reports will still be here tomorrow, you know." Alexander gathered his tablet and notes. "Tell that to my father." What no one at Cole Enterprises knew was that Alexander had been secretly supporting various community programs, anonymously. It was his private rebellion against his father's philosophy that charity was a weakness, a way of finding meaning beyond spreadsheets and profit margins. Richard Cole had built his empire on unwavering focus and unsentimental business decisions. He'd raised his son to follow the same path after Alexander's mother died when he was just 10. Weakness, according to Richard, was a luxury they couldn't afford. Emotion clouded judgment. Attachment led to vulnerability. Alexander had learned the lessons well, becoming the heir his father demanded. But something had shifted in the past year, a growing disillusionment with success that felt increasingly hollow, a questioning of values he'd accepted without examination. He'd begun volunteering at a downtown literacy program under a different name, finding unexpected satisfaction in helping adults learn skills that had eluded them. The gratitude in their eyes offered a different kind of return on investment than the figures in his quarterly reports. Back at Oak Ridge Haven, Elena was organizing the storage room when Ms. Iris, the shelter's eldest resident, settled into a folding chair by the door. "Don't mind me," Ms. Iris said, adjusting her colorful head wrap. "These old bones need a rest, and watching you work is better than those reality shows everyone's so fond of." Elena smiled, continuing to sort through donated clothing. "You could help fold if you're just going to sit there critiquing my technique." "I'm 87, child. I've earned the right to supervise," Ms. Iris replied with a chuckle. Her dark eyes, still sharp despite her years, studied Elena thoughtfully. "You're different lately, more distant. The light in your eyes dims when you think no one's looking." Elena's hand stilled momentarily. "Just tired, Ms. Iris. The fundraiser is coming up, and we're still short of our goal." "Child, I've been on this earth for 87 years. I know the difference between tired and heartbroken." Ms. Iris leaned forward, her voice softening. "Your grandmother and I were friends for 30 years. She wouldn't want you to use this place as a shield against living." "I'm not." "You are," Ms. Iris interrupted gently. "The heart is resilient, Elena. It heals stronger in the broken places. But only if you let it heal, not if you wall it up and pretend it isn't there." Elena resumed folding, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine. Really." Ms. Iris sighed. "When my Harold died after 43 years of marriage, I thought I'd never feel joy again. But life has a way of surprising you if you leave the door open just a crack." Before Elena could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Denise, who volunteered at the shelter on weekends. "Coffee tomorrow? I have news." Elena quickly replied affirmatively, grateful for the interruption. The following afternoon, seated in their favorite cafe, Elena listened as Denise bubbled over with excitement about her recent promotion. Denise worked in marketing for a local tech company, her creative energy and extroverted personality perfectly suited to the dynamic environment. "Enough about me," Denise said finally, stirring her latte. "How are you? And don't say fine because that's your default answer to everything." Elena laughed. "The shelter keeps me busy. We're preparing for the winter fundraiser, and I'm a little stressed about meeting our goals." "That's work, not you," Denise pointed out. "When was the last time you went on a date?" Elena rolled her eyes. "Not this again." "Yes, this again. It's been 3 years, Elle. 3 years since Tyler. You've turned down every introduction I've offered." "Because I'm not interested in being set up," Elena replied, her tone cooling slightly. "You're not interested in taking any risks," Denise corrected. "And I get it. Tyler was a jerk for making you choose. But he was one man, one disappointment. Don't let him rob you of future joy." "I'm happy with my life," Elena protested, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. "Content isn't the same as happy," Denise replied with the honesty of long-time friendship. "You do important work, and I admire that. But you deserve more than just your job, no matter how meaningful it is." She leaned forward. "When was the last time you took a risk on something that scared you?" Elena's gaze dropped to her coffee. The truth was, she couldn't remember. The Community Champions initiative wasn't Elena's idea. The board had suggested partnering with local businesses to increase funding and visibility for Oak Ridge Haven. She had reluctantly agreed, but insisted that any corporate partners would need to understand the shelter's values, that this wasn't just about tax write-offs or polishing company images. She hadn't expected Cole Enterprises to respond to their outreach, much less send their CEO for an initial meeting. The company was known for luxury developments and commercial properties, not community involvement. When the email arrived confirming Alexander Cole's visit, Elena had researched him thoroughly, finding numerous articles praising his business acumen, but revealing little about the man himself. Cole Enterprises? Marilyn had questioned when Elena mentioned the upcoming meeting. Aren't they the ones building those high-rises downtown that replace the affordable housing units? That's them, Elena confirmed. I'm not optimistic, but we can't afford to turn away potential support without at least hearing them out. Your grandmother always said to judge people by their actions, not their reputations, Marilyn reminded her. Maybe there's more to this Cole fellow than the business pages suggest. Alexander arrived at Oak Ridge Haven on a crisp autumn morning, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than the shelter's monthly utility bill. From her office window, Elena watched him step out of a sleek black car, noting how he paused to take in the modest building before entering. She straightened her simple blazer, a professional armor over a cotton blouse and slacks, and went to meet him. Mr. Cole, welcome to Oak Ridge Haven. I'm Elena Wright, the director. Alexander, please, he said, extending his hand. His handshake was firm, his blue eyes assessing the modest surroundings with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. Not dismissal, but not quite respect either. Your proposal was quite compelling. I'm interested in learning more about your operation. Elena bristled slightly at the term operation, as if the shelter were a business venture rather than community, but kept her expression neutral. We appreciate your interest. I thought we could start with a tour, so you can see firsthand what we do here. She led him through a facility, conscious of the peeling paint in some areas and the mismatched furniture donated over the years. Compared to the gleaming corporate headquarters of Cole Enterprises, Oak Ridge Haven must seem shabby indeed. Yet there was a warmth here, a sense of belonging evident in the artwork created by residents that lined the hallways and the small touches that made institutional spaces feel more like home. We currently house 38 residents, Elena explained as they passed a community room where a job skills workshop was in progress. Our capacity is 45, but we prefer to keep a few beds open for emergencies. Most residents stay between 3 and 6 months, though some elderly individuals like Ms. Iris have become permanent fixtures. Alexander nodded, listening intently. Elena noticed he watched residents interact, observing the community they'd built rather than just a physical space. The average age of our residents has been increasing, she continued. Rising housing costs are particularly affecting seniors on fixed incomes. We've adapted our programs accordingly, adding health monitoring and transportation to medical appointments. And your funding sources? Alexander inquired as they entered the dining area. Grants, individual donations, local business contributions, and a small endowment my grandmother established. Elena answered, We operate on a tight budget, but we're proud of how far we stretch each dollar. I can see that, Alexander commented, and Elena was surprised to detect genuine appreciation rather than condescension in his tone. As they continued through the educational center, where computer training classes were held, Alexander asked thoughtful questions about success rates and follow-up services. Elena found herself warming slightly to his evident interest, though she remained wary of his motives. We're more than just beds and meals, Elena explained as they observed a young mother working with a tutor while her children played nearby. We provide job training, counseling, educational support, whatever our residents need to rebuild their lives. Commendable, Alexander replied, his gaze lingering on the children. But surely you considered scaling your model? With proper investment, you could help more people expand to multiple locations. Elena stopped walking. Mr. Cole, Alexander, this isn't a business franchise. These are people's lives, their safe space. Growth for growth's sake isn't our goal. Then what is your goal? He asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. To create a place where people can rediscover their worth and dignity, Elena answered without hesitation, passion animating her features. Where they can heal before they rebuild. Where they're treated as individuals with unique needs and strengths, not as problems to be solved or statistics to improve. Something flickered in Alexander's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or something deeper. An admirable mission. But even healing requires resources. Resources, yes. Commercialization, no, Elena countered, then softened her tone. We welcome partnerships that understand our values. If that's what Cole Enterprises is interested in, we're happy to explore possibilities. As they concluded the tour in her small office, Alexander studied the photographs on the wall. Images of residents who had successfully transitioned to independent living, smiling alongside Elena or her grandmother. "You created something meaningful here," he said finally, his tone thoughtful. "Something authentic." "My grandmother created it," Elena corrected. "I'm just continuing her work." "Don't diminish your own role," Alexander replied. "Legacy is about more than preservation. It's about evolution." Elena was startled by the insight. "You sound like you speak from experience." A shadow crossed his face. "Perhaps I do." He turned from the photographs. "I'd like Cole Enterprises to contribute to your upcoming winter fundraiser. No strings attached." Elena studied him skeptically. "Why?" "Maybe I see value in what you're doing here," he replied. "Or maybe it's good PR. Does the motivation matter if the result helps your residents?" "Motivation always matters," Elena said quietly. "It's the difference between a transaction and a transformation, between writing a check to ease your conscience and actually engaging with the community you claim to support." Instead of taking offense, Alexander's lips curved into the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. "Ms. Wright, I think we might have more to discuss." Over the following weeks, Alexander became a regular visitor at Oak Ridge Haven. What began as formal meetings about the fundraiser evolved into longer conversations that often continued over coffee at the small cafe around the corner. Elena discovered that beneath his corporate exterior, Alexander possessed a thoughtful perspective and unexpected depth. "Your father founded Cole Enterprises?" Elena asked during one such conversation, curious about the man behind the executive image. "Grandfather, actually," Alexander corrected. "My father expanded it significantly, though. He took a local construction company and transformed it into a regional development corporation." "At what cost?" Elena asked, then caught herself. "I'm sorry, that was presumptuous." "But not inaccurate," Alexander replied, surprising her. "My father built our company on the principle that success comes to those who put themselves first. It's taken me years to question that philosophy." "Is that why you're here?" Elena asked, questioning. "Perhaps," he admitted, turning his coffee cup slowly. "Or perhaps I'm looking for something real in a world that often feels manufactured." The vulnerability in his admission touched Elena. For the first time, she saw beyond the CEO to the man who, despite his privilege, carried his own burdens. Their conversations ranged widely, from practical discussions about the fundraiser to deeper exchanges about purpose and meaning. Elena found herself looking forward to their meetings, appreciating his strategic mind and the way he listened, truly listened, when residents shared their stories. She noticed how children at the shelter gravitated toward him, and how he never checked his watch when speaking with the elderly residents. He seemed particularly drawn to Ms. Iris, often sitting with her in the community room, apparently captivated by her stories of civil rights marches and community organizing in the 1960s. "That young man has old eyes," Ms. Iris commented to Elena one evening. "Reminds me of my late brother, carrying more weight than anyone can see." "He's just a corporate donor being polite," Elena demurred, unwilling to acknowledge the connection forming between them. Ms. Iris just smiled knowingly. "If you say so, child." Without announcement, small improvements began appearing at the shelter: a new industrial refrigerator when the old one failed, updated computers for the education center, a playground renovation completed overnight. When Elena questioned these mysterious gifts, the suppliers simply mentioned an anonymous donor. She suspected Alexander but said nothing, understanding instinctively that his anonymity mattered to him. It suggested that his involvement wasn't about public recognition or corporate image, that perhaps he was sincere in his desire to support the shelter's mission. Denise, however, was less subtle in her observations when she visited the shelter to help prepare for the fundraiser. "So, Alexander Cole," she said meaningfully when they were alone in the supply room. "What about him?" Elena asked, pretending absorption in inventory lists. "Oh, please," Denise scoffed. "The billionaire CEO who suddenly has time to visit a community shelter every week? Who looks at you like you're the answer to a question he's been asking himself for years?" "He doesn't. It's not like that," Elena protested. "He's interested in the shelter, not me." "Keep telling yourself that," Denise replied. "But I've seen the way you light up when he arrives." and how you check your appearance before his visits. I do not. Elena, honey, it's okay to be attracted to someone. It doesn't betray Tyler or compromise your independence. I'm not having this conversation, Elena said firmly, though her cheeks betrayed a slight flush. The truth was more complicated than Elena was willing to admit, even to herself. Alexander challenged her assumptions about corporate America, about privilege, about the division she'd drawn between her world and his. He asked questions that made her examine her own motivations and biases. And yes, she found herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering about the life behind the polished facade he presented to the world. Their connection deepened unexpectedly when a pipe burst during a freezing night in late November, flooding part of the shelter. Elena had been working late and discovered water pouring from the ceiling in the women's dormitory. In a panic, she called the emergency maintenance number, only to receive a recorded message that technicians wouldn't be available until morning. Without thinking, she called Alexander. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. Elena, is everything all right? I'm sorry to call so late, but we have an emergency at the shelter, she explained quickly. A burst pipe is flooding the women's dormitory, and I can't get maintenance until morning. I don't know what to do. The residents have nowhere to go. I'll be there in 30 minutes, he replied without hesitation. Start moving everyone to dry areas. I'll bring help. True to his word, Alexander arrived within 30 minutes, bringing not only plumbers but also contractors to assess the damage, portable heaters to warm the community room where residents were gathering, and arrangements for temporary accommodations at a nearby hotel owned by a business associate. He worked alongside Elena through the night, his expensive suit discarded for the shelter's T-shirt and jeans from the donation bin, helping residents relocate and salvage belongings. She saw a different side of him, decisive yet compassionate, efficient yet personal in his interactions with frightened and displaced residents. As dawn broke, the immediate crisis had been contained. The plumbers had stopped the leak, and contractors were already assessing repair needs. Most residents were settled at the hotel, with a few elders who preferred to stay at the shelter relocated to the unaffected men's dormitory, which had been temporarily converted for their use. Working side by side through the crisis, barriers fell away. Elena caught glimpses of the man beneath the tailored suits, compassionate, decisive, and carrying his own hidden burdens. She found herself respecting not just his resources, but his character, his willingness to literally roll up his sleeves and address problems directly. When the crisis passed, Alexander found Elena in the shelter's small garden, exhausted but relieved. She sat on a bench beneath the bare branches of an old apple tree, her face pale in the winter sunlight. "You should get some rest," he said, sitting beside her. He looked different in the donated clothes, more accessible, more human. "The contractors will handle everything from here." "Thank you," she said simply, too tired for pride. "You didn't have to do all this." "Yes, I did," he replied, meeting her gaze directly. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Understanding, connection, possibility. For a moment, Elena allowed herself to imagine a different future than the one she resigned herself to, a future where her dedication to Oak Ridge Haven didn't preclude personal happiness. The moment shattered when Elena's phone rang. The caller ID showed the Cole Enterprises logo. Puzzled, she answered, "Ms. Wright? This is Jessica Winters, Mr. Cole's assistant. I'm calling regarding some documents you requested about the development plans for your neighborhood." "I didn't request any documents," Elena said, confused. There was a pause. "I see. There must have been some miscommunication. I apologize for confusion." As Elena ended the call, she turned to Alexander with questions in her eyes. "Development plans? For this neighborhood?" The flash of discomfort on Alexander's face confirmed what the call had inadvertently revealed. "Elena, I can explain," he began. "Explain what?" she asked, her voice cooling. "That while you've been gaining our trust, your company has been planning something that affects the shelter?" "It's not what you think," Alexander said. "Cole Enterprises is considering developing the block where Oak Ridge Haven stands into luxury condominiums. The shelter was identified as an obstacle to our plans, but I've been working to redirect the project. Were you ever going to tell me? She demanded, hurt and betrayal evident in her voice. All the warmth between the moments ago had vanished, replaced by the same wall that had protected her since Tyler's departure. When I had a viable alternative to present to the board, Alexander explained, I didn't want to worry you unnecessarily. Unnecessarily? Elena stood, anger replacing exhaustion. This is our home, Alexander. These people have nowhere else to go. And you've been what? Playing some kind of double game? It's my father's project, not mine, Alexander insisted, rising to face her. I've been working to redirect it since before I even met you. That's why I responded to your partnership proposal in the first place, to find a way to protect the shelter, while pretending to support us. Elena's voice cracked. I trusted you. And you can still trust me, Alexander said urgently. I'm on your side in this, Elena. I promise you. But promises were exactly what Elena had learned to distrust. I think you should go, Mr. Cole. Alexander flinched at her return to formality, but nodded slowly. I understand why you're angry, but this isn't over. Neither the threat to the shelter nor my commitment to protecting it. He moved toward the garden gate, then paused. For what it's worth, nothing I've said or done here has been insincere. Nothing. As he walked away, Elena remained in the garden, conflicted emotions warring within her. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust the connection they'd formed. But experience had taught her that when personal feelings collided with professional ambitions, the latter usually won. What she couldn't see was Alexander sitting in his car around the corner, making a series of urgent calls that would ultimately determine the shelter's fate and their future. The winter fundraiser arrived with tension still high. Alexander had respected Elena's request for distance, though he continued to send messages expressing his opposition to his father's development plans and his commitment to finding a solution. Elena read each message but responded only with brief acknowledgments, protecting herself from further disappointment. Despite her personal turmoil, Elena had thrown herself into fundraiser preparations, determined to raise enough money to secure the shelter's future. The event was being held at the city's botanical gardens, a venue donated by a longtime supporter of Oak Ridge Haven. Residents had helped decorate, creating handmade centerpieces for each table, and local businesses had contributed items for the silent auction. The evening was going well, with attendance higher than previous years and bidding on auction items exceeding expectations. Elena circulated among guests in a simple but elegant blue dress borrowed from Denise, pushing aside her personal concerns to focus on the shelter's needs. You've outdone yourself, Marilyn commented, surveying the transformed greenhouse space with approval. Rose would be proud. We still need another $50,000 to reach our goal, Elena replied, checking the fundraising thermometer display. Have faith, Marilyn advised. The night is young. Elena was speaking with a potential donor when she noticed a commotion at the entrance. Her heart sank as she recognized not Alexander, but an older man with the same commanding presence and cold eyes. Richard Cole, Alexander's father. He was accompanied by several associates in expensive suits, their expression suggesting this wasn't a social call. Before Elena could intercept them, Richard spotted her and approached with a businesslike smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ms. Wright, I believe? Richard Cole. We have matters to discuss regarding your establishment. Before Elena could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. Father, this isn't the time or place. Alexander appeared at Elena's side, his expression carefully neutral, but his stance protective. He was impeccably dressed in a tuxedo, but Elena noticed a tension in his shoulders and the tight set of his jaw. On the contrary, Richard replied coolly, Ms. Wright should hear our generous relocation offer before she wastes more effort on this fundraiser. Relocation? Elena echoed, looking between father and son. Around them, guests had fallen silent, attention drawn to the evident confrontation. A formality, really, Richard continued, seemingly oblivious to the audience they'd attracted. Cole Enterprises will develop this block into something truly beneficial for the community. Luxury housing, high-end retail, a proper tax base. Will provide funds to move your shelter to a more appropriate area. This shelter has been at the heart of this community for 40 years, Elena said, struggling to maintain her composure. These people belong here. Their support systems, their jobs, their medical care, Everything is based on this location. Progress requires change, Ms. Wright. Richard stated dismissively. The board has already approved the development plan. The paperwork is being finalized next week. The board approved it provisionally, Alexander interrupted, his voice firm. Pending the alternative proposal I submitted yesterday. Richard's eyes narrowed. An alternative I advised him to reject. This isn't progress. It's profit at the expense of people who have already lost enough. Richard's expression hardened. I didn't raise you to be sentimental, Alexander. Remember where your loyalties lie. I know exactly where they lie, Alexander replied, his gaze briefly meeting Elena's before he turned to address the gathered crowd, taking the microphone from the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to be transparent about something. Cole Enterprises, my family's company, has been considering a development project that would displace Oak Ridge Haven. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, and Elena saw anger and concern on the faces of supporters. But tonight, I'm announcing my opposition to that project and my personal commitment to ensure this shelter remains exactly where it belongs. Richard's face darkened with anger as Alexander continued. Furthermore, I'm pledging a personal matching grant for every dollar raised tonight. Not from the company, but from my own resources. He looked directly at Elena. Because I believe in what happens here. I believe in second chances. The crowd erupted in applause, drowning out Richard's furious response. Elena stood frozen, trying to process Alexander's public stand against his father and the company he led. Richard pushed through the crowd toward his son, his voice low but intense. You're making a mistake you'll regret. The board won't stand for this kind of public defiance. Then I'll resign, Alexander replied calmly. My position means nothing if it requires sacrificing my principles. Principles? Richard scoffed. Is that what you call this infatuation with a social worker and her pet project? This isn't about Elena, Alexander answered, though his gaze sought her in the crowd. It's about the kind of man I want to be, the kind of legacy I want to build. Richard studied his son with cold assessment. Your mother always said you had her heart. I see she was right, and just as foolish. She would be proud of that comparison, Alexander replied steadily. Good night, Father. As Richard and his associates departed, the fundraiser gradually resumed its momentum. Energized by Alexander's announcement, donations poured in, pushing them well beyond their original goal. Elena moved through her duties mechanically, her mind reeling from the confrontation and its implications. Later, as the event wound down, she found Alexander in Botanical Garden's small Japanese section, seated on a stone bench beside a frozen koi pond. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Your father looked ready to disown you. He might, Alexander acknowledged, his breath visible in the cold night air. But I've spent too long trying to win the approval of someone who measures success only in dollars. Why risk so much for us? For the shelter? Alexander turned to face her, vulnerability evident in his expression. Because you showed me what matters. What's real? He hesitated. And because I think I'm falling in love with you. Elena, I know you have every reason not to trust me, but these past weeks have changed me. Changed how I see the world, what I value, what I want for my future. Elena felt tears threatening. I was afraid, she admitted, not just of you, but of feeling anything again. After Tyler left, I convinced myself that loving the shelter was enough, that focusing on others' needs would fill the empty spaces in my own life. Is it enough? Alexander asked quietly. Elena stepped closer, allowing herself to acknowledge the truth. No, but it took meeting someone who understands commitment, real commitment, to help me see that. Alexander stood, closing the distance between them. I can't promise it will be easy. My father won't give up without a fight, and changing the company's direction will take time. But I can promise that I won't give up on the shelter, on what I believe is right, or on us, if you're willing to give us a chance.